Okay. This session is the impacts of COVID-19 to the aviation MRO industry, which will be delivered by TS Liew Chee Leong, which is the head of engineering at the SR Aviation, which is as well our adjunct professor at the Department of Aerospace Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, Universiti Putra, Malaysia. He will be delivered this topic for roughly about 1 hour and 30 minutes, and afterwards we can have some sort of question and answer sessions between the presenters and with all of you. Before we begin, perhaps Dr. Abdul Rahim, I would like to say something about today's sessions. I invite Dr. Rahim.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning. I hope all of you are doing well. And first of all, thank you very much for TS Ricky for willing to share his input on the experience on the aerospace industry, especially when we are now in the pandemic situation. We are now under the not just we, the whole world are under the impact of this COVID-19. So I also would like to welcome all of you to be here. Some of our academic members, staff, I believe there are also undergraduate students, postgraduate students, as well as colleagues from other universities, as well as industries. I just made to know that there are also people outside Malaysia in this particular session. So without further ado, I welcome T.S. Ricky to give his sharing his slides with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rahim. I hope you all can hear me loud and clear. First of all, I would like to thank UPM, especially Dr. Rahim, who is the head of the aerospace department. Thank you, Dr. Yazdi, for the coordinating and making this session a reality. I think it is very important that the students or the participants are made aware what is happening to the industry, in particularly in the industry that is related to us. And my name is Ricky Liew, and I'm currently the head of engineering in SR Aviation. Now, we are an MRO, and I have been in the MRO industry from Malaysia Airlines to Eva Airways, and then to KLM, and then to our very own Malaysian own corporate jet MRO based in Subang for the last 15 years. So in the past 31 years, I have seen a lot of things that is going through by the aviation industry in Malaysia, including myself. But today, and especially this year, it is a totally different scenario where we as aircraft engineers and the students now at UPM, you will be engineer one day. You might also be going through some of the challenges in the aviation industry. COVID-19 is one of the most, by history, is one of the most impacted situation to the aviation industry. So the topic today that I'm sharing with you all is actually the impact of COVID-19, in particular to the aviation MRO industry. And I would like to make this session more of a kind of, we do an interactive kind of session so that I don't feel like talking to the wall or talking to the camera. And if you like to, you can also respond to the answers. Okay. First of all, how many people realize or have ever seen the data about the COVID-19 impact to the travel industry? How many have you all? I'm sure you have been reading in the news that there are people are becoming jobless. Airlines are actually shutting down. and the operation has actually been reduced, and the company or the are facing some financial difficulties. There are also government, the international body that is actually requesting the nation, the government of many nations to actually help the aviation or the aerospace or the airline companies so that they are able to sustain. So this situation is actually have never have a precedence before, and the financial losses or the financial impact is actually very significant, and that is only from the financial part. What about from the economic part? Okay, when we talk about economy, I think the first thing that we should know is actually we are talking about jobs, we are talking about generating income, we are talking about sustainability. So let's go back to the very basic. Because of this COVID-19, what is the potential job loss in the aviation industry? Now, if you look at this chart here, we are talking about more than 100 million of jobs that's going to be lost or affected throughout the world, throughout the world. And if we zoom down to the Asia Pacific, yeah, if you look at the table on the Asia Pacific side, we are expecting about 63.4 million jobs will be affected. This is a very high number, and Malaysia are part of it. Now, for those who do not have the statistic, let me share with you how many jobs are there, how many people are there are being employed in the aviation industry in Malaysia. Currently, statistically, we have about 20,000, 22,000 of people who are working in the aviation industry. Now, we are talking about the uh, the MROs, where we have engineers, we have technicians, we have mechanics. We are talking about the ticketing. We are talking about the what do you call it, the baggage handlers. We are talking about the design office. We are talking about the maintenance services. All this, all this, we have about 20 over thousand people. Now, these 20 over thousand people is actually one of the major contributor to the economy of Malaysia. Now, let's look at it. In the past few months, what has actually happened? Okay. Now, the first impact we know that that was being affected by the COVID-19 is the hit was the airline, and when the airline is affected, it actually has a chain reaction into where? Chain reaction into the traveling industry. We are talking about the hotels affected. No passengers are coming into the country, so we cannot have income. What about the taxi industry? What about the buses industry? What about those tourist visiting industries? What about the food industry? What about the trading industry? So if you look at the chain reaction of it, whenever the airline is affected, whenever the aviation operation is affected, it actually tangles up with the rest of the industry in the whole of Malaysia. So if you realize that since the COVID, the first announcement of the MCO, yeah, the first announcement of the MCO, the transport and the logistic industry was not restricted. From March, I remember we started in the middle of March, the MCO. When the government declared MCO, the transport and the logistic industry was not actually restricted. Why? Because the whole economy of the Malaysian is actually driven by this backbone of the transport and logistic industry, and therefore, we continue to work. Like for me, I'm in the MRO. Okay, I actually continue to work despite having the MCO order. But there is a lot of things which I'm going to share with you that it actually impacted us the way we work, the way we check things, the way we handle procedures. It is totally different. So you will know that essentially the airlines, the transport industry, it actually becomes the backbone of the economy of Malaysia. And now with the COVID-19, you can see effectively the whole airline operation throughout the world is effectively came to a standstill. It is almost standstill, like there's almost no more flights throughout the world. And if you saw the news this morning, yesterday we had a flight from KLIA to Tawau, right? And when the flight has reached Tawau, when they did the COVID-19 test, and 6 of the passengers was actually tested positive for COVID-19. And now we have another issue. What happened to the airplane? What are we going to do with the airplane? What are we going to do with the rest of the passengers? So people are becoming very careful in terms of operating the airplane. And that is why you will see effectively the whole airline operation is coming to a standstill, especially for the last few months. The only flights, the only flights that are allowed, yeah, especially for the last 1-2 months, is essentially the humanitarian mission flights. Humanitarian mission flights. What do I mean by humanitarian mission flights? Those evacuation flights. That means for example, Malaysia has sent its flight to China and the few other countries to actually bring back stranded Malaysians in the overseas, in foreign countries that is affected by COVID-19, and we bring them back. These are what we call humanitarian flights. Okay. The other flights that is being allowed is actually the cargo flights. Now, the cargo flights are essentially used for what? To transport medical aids, testing equipments, uh, test kits from wherever country that need it, or to wherever country that need it, or from wherever country that we have it. Malaysia was also involved. So these are the only flights that is actually allowed. Only, I think, last week, only slowly the passengers flights start coming back up again. But even that, there's so much of additional procedures, additional safety processes that the airline need to take, the crew need to take, even the maintenance MRO like us, we also have special additional procedures. I'm going to share a little bit afterwards as we go along. Now, the whole network of operations, yeah, during this COVID-19 has been severely reduced. Never, never in the history of the aviation world that we saw such a huge number of aircraft that is grounded throughout the world, sampai up to the level where the airport has no more place to park the airplanes. It is so severe. And for countries like Singapore, which is very humid, we have limited space, they actually have to ferry the aircraft, some of the most advanced airplanes, to Australia just for the parking. So the flight cancellations, this is all because of the flight cancellation. Now, this capacity, because of this grounding, because of this parking, positioning of the planes, it actually came up with the result that the airline is actually operating about 5 to 20%. Those airlines that is still operating, the capacity is only about 5 to 20% capacity. What it means is that If an airline used to have 100 airplanes, actually they might be flying only 5 airplanes only. If they have about 100 staff, the capacity maybe they are using only about 5 to 10 or 15 staff only. So the whole operation has actually shrink down so much. Now, when the flight is cancelled, when there is so little flights, what does it mean? What does it mean? You know, there's hundreds of aircraft that is being grounded. That actually is what it means. These aircraft are not flying. And what are you going to do about it? Okay. Now, I just give a statistically what I saw was reported in the news. Some of the data. If you look at the Malaysia Airlines, yeah, Malaysia Airlines is our national carrier. They operate 81 aircraft. 53 is grounded. 53. And this we are talking about our national carrier. You know, let's talk about Malindo. 20 aircraft out of 36. More than half. And you look at the most biggest fleet of a Malaysian carrier, AirAsia. AirAsia has 255 aircraft. 245 are being grounded. My God, these 245, how are we going to look after the airplane? The whole airport is flooded with Asia airplane. If you want to look for one aircraft, you don't know where to look because the airport is so huge, and this affected the maintenance team, the maintenance operation. How are we going to handle this massive situation? How are we going to handle? Yeah, Singapore Airlines grounded 130 airplanes. Qantas 150, Delta 300. We are talking about grounding and airplanes from tens to hundreds of airplanes. This amount of aircraft, my God, it is actually has a very, very strong impact in leads to financial distress. We as engineers, yeah, I'm sure that many of the students here, you're going to be a product of a UPM and you'll be engineers out there one day. Now, the good thing about having doing these classes in the UPM is that they bring in industry people and let you see beyond engineering. You as an engineer, you need to know the financial distress. What is happening when our engineering work or our maintenance works are being affected? What is the first distress that we have? Financial distress. The whole airline goes into financial distress. The people who are working went into financial distress. Why? Why? Because of cost-cutting measures. I have friends who are working and are doing so well in overseas, calling me asking for a job. Cathay Pacific, Singapore, whether there's any job back in Malaysia, because financial distress has caused them to lose their job. Some of them has been paid unpaid leave. Some call me even from the engine servicing center. For example, General Electrics. Yeah, when they, you see, even though the aircraft that is parked is actually parked in the airport, right? But a facility that does engine component workshop somewhere else, it is also affected. I received calls and asked me whether there's any job, and they were very worried because why? They they felt that they're going to lose their job soon if the airplanes continue to fly. So as engineers, we need to know and understand all these things. You know, COVID-19 looks like it's a biological or a medical issue, but it is not just medical issue. Engineering are affected, airlines are affected. And the other thing is that I'm not sure if you all have seen the news. There's already a few airlines have declared bankruptcy, moving towards bankruptcy procedures. There are also airlines that appealing to the government, please help us. Otherwise, they're going to shut down. And remember, if you look at the earlier slide, when you shut down an operation, when you shut down the operation, the airline operation, the first industry is affected is the travel industry, and travel industry has a domino effect to the restaurant, to the hotels, and all those. So it is not just like, oh, okay, it is a medical issue, COVID-19 of this virus and all those, just like that. No, we as engineers, we know in our area, if we are not careful, we will be affected as well. So this is the mindset that we as engineers, we actually need to understand. So COVID-19 impact to the aviation industry, I must say, it is actually a negative impact, quite negative impact, because it actually has a domino effect to the rest of the industry, All right. Now, let me share a bit with you something that we have not done before in the rest in our past 30, 31 years, something that we have not done before, and because of the impact of the COVID-19, because of the MCO, we as engineers usually we solve complex problems on the technical designs, issues, systems, and all those. But many of the engineers, one day, as you gain your experience, you're going to be a leader someday. You'll probably be a lead engineer, you'll probably be a engineering manager, or you are in charge of certain sections. Now, when we lead a team, we don't just lead them just to work, right? Or just to design things or just look after the operations. When this COVID-19 first impacted, the first thing that we addressed was actually contacted or I communicated with my safety manager. Now, of course, it is my responsible, but I have also my safety manager that is along with me in our MRO company to look into the issues. Now, what happened is that when this COVID-19 came, back in early January, when it first started reported in China, the safety manager has been asked to look into the effect, the potential effect of what going to happen to our company. Now, most MRO, including my MRO, my company, we have an emergency response plan. It is by law, by the authority, that we need to have emergency response plan. Now, what is the problem here? Emergency response plan responds to aircraft emergency, not COVID-19 emergency. That is where we got caught. And so if a safety manager who has very strong skills, very strong knowledge, she will immediately sit down and start doing the readout, the recommendation, the cases, what is the WHO recommendation, what is the ministry government recommendation, and what is their response. He first has to do that study first. So he has to spend a lot of time, So when the safety manager came in, the first thing is that now MCO is going to come into effect. Now, if MCO come into effect, and we know the Civil Aviation Authority did not restrict the aerospace industry, that means we can continue to operate. Question is how? How are we going to operate this very, very safely to protect the team of engineers, the team of technicians, the team of mechanics that is going to come in and report for duty? We don't even talk about what is happening to the airplane. We don't even talk about that first. The first thing is the safety of the team members. This is one of the very strong impact. Never before an engineer has to look into the health of the team members. Tak pernah. We have not done that. So the first thing that we have is that we have to put the people first mindset. That was the very first thing that we do. And it becomes a little bit, what you call it, it becomes a little bit awkward because why? It's actually because we used to look into technicalities of engineering, technology, and systems. Now, from a technical part, change to a health part, that is where we have the challenge. Now, how do we actually implement, continue to operate? How do we continue to operate without having the problems of people having fear? So what happened is that we actually first was to do the training and the awareness program for all the technical stuff. So instead of conducting technical training, we are conducting safety training. Now, this is very, very pandemic specific, which means that we look into what has been happening in the last 1 month, 2 months. Okay, we need to study this. Now, if you look at the report, there are many reports that talks about health in general. But what about the health in MRO or in engineering organization? You cannot see that yet. You actually don't see that yet. It is very general. It is very, at that time, it was very general, specific safety procedures. It was actually in the middle of April. It was in the middle of April that we have been contacted by the National Aerospace Industry Coordinating Office to actually come up with the procedures. And we actually, because we have started way back in January, we actually have documented some of the procedures, not a complete perfect one, but whatever that we experienced, we actually document it, and slowly we actually pass it over to the government, National Aerospace Industry Coordinating Office. And some of the procedures has actually been adopted. Now, what the problem earlier at the earlier stages is that when the COVID-19 first came, people did not take it seriously. Now, when people don't take it seriously, that is the time the vulnerability for exposure to this COVID-19 become very, very risky. Now, and the challenge is, how do we make our staff, our engineering team members, to start aware that, hey, look, COVID-19 has a very, very serious effect on us. The only way is actually keep giving them the awareness training. I think we did about 4 or 5 sessions just to drill the message into the technicians, because these technicians or engineers, when they go back home, if they are not aware of the seriousness, they will just go out without any protection procedures and all those, and they will be infected. And if they are infected and come into the MRO organization, can you imagine? And there's somebody positive in the MRO organization, it is almost a shutting down of the MRO. It is almost equivalent to shutting down of the MRO. So we have to start with the people. How are we going to educate? How are we going to educate the engineers and technicians to let them realize that, look, be very, very careful, and we are serious about it. Now, in order for us to do that, apart from the training part, we also have to establish very, very strong communication. Very, very strong, trustworthy condition. That means the staff, the engineering staff, the technicians, if they are infected, or somebody in their family or somebody close to them are infected, dia tak malu. He won't feel shy to declare to the company, to the management. And we can never penalize any one of them, because nobody will want COVID-19. This mindset is so important, because once Once they feel that they are unsafe, they will be isolated, they will be alienated, they will be blamed and all those. They are not going to declare their health status. When they don't declare, the whole organization will expose to the risk of shutting down. So this, to me, before we even talk about the technicality of the airplane, this is one of the strongest challenge or strongest impact that we face. How are we going to deal with our people first? We need to give them a sense of care, a sense of care when they come to work. When they come to work, they have actually all the safety provisions given to them. For example, we have sufficient desanitizer. I still remember back in the February, when the COVID-19 reached into the February's time, we are starting to lost. We were starting to lose the desanitizer. There was shortage of desanitizer. There was shortage of actually towards the March, shortage of this mask. There was a shortage of face shield. There was also shortage of this infrared thermometer. All these become a challenge to us, that how are we going to manage the whole engineering team members. Now, the other thing is that we actually need to give them a peace of mind. For example, I just give you a case. It has not happened to our company yet, but I already briefed the safety manager. Now, in case a team member, an engineering team member, make a declaration that they say, okay, in my family, my my relative in my family, like for example, somebody who is very close has been tested positive for COVID-19, and the whole family will be in a distress situation. Provisions, we, the company, it is our responsibility to give them personal or compassionate leave, to let them have an ease of mind, let them go, and then go back to the family and sort out that COVID-19 issue that they're having in the family. Let them go, let them go, let them take on leave, and let them handle the family issues until they are comfortable, the family is safe, then they have a peace of mind, they can come back to the office or come back to the hangar and continue the operation. To me, this part, the psychologically and the health part, is something that we have never handled before. This is something so new to us because we are so used to handle AOG, we are so used to handle scheduled maintenance, unscheduled maintenance, troubleshooting, servicing. But this is not something that we have done before. But so far, based on my companies, we have managed to handle it well. Our safety manager has been able to keep updating himself, and he has actually full authority on these COVID-19 issues. Any meeting that he wants to call for, any procedure that he implemented, even though as an engineering manager or the head of engineering, we will comply. We will comply. It's not like, you are just a safety manager and I'm the head of the whole engineering organization. Therefore, I will be exempted. No. Whatever the safety manager calls for, procedures, whether we want to discuss or want to implement procedures, the engineering, the management have full support, provide full support to the safety manager. This is the first impact that we have. And this has been going on for months. Even yesterday, there was still an updated briefing to us for the engineering team members to be extremely careful. Because kalau tidak, if we think that nothing lah, now the cases has dropped down, the Malaysian cases now I think dropped down to very low numbers, and if we become lax, the vulnerability, the exposure again comes back up. So we cannot let down our defense. We cannot lax our defense. This thing has to continue on. So the safety manager is continuously upgrading himself with his additional knowledge, with the latest apps and all those, and this keep on disseminating to the engineering team members. This is the first safety measures that we have to implement first before we even talk about aircraft. And this is the very, very first challenge that we have. Now, if there's any questions of the gentleman, please can ask me. So far, any questions on this slide? Because I felt that this slide is is very important, because otherwise, if this part has failed, the safety of the engineering team members fail. You can forget about talking about doing other technical work on the aircraft. Any questions so far for this part?
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, Ricky.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm Fahmi from UTHM. Yeah, I got a question for you regarding this latest incident in Tawau, because we see
Yes.
that with all this SOP being in place, I'm not so sure, because with the current CM has already actually issued this number 8 circular 2020, where now the ATOs also has been opened, but we need to send our SOP to CM. But previously, because aviation is an essential services, do they also create an SOP that is being approved by CM? One question. Secondly, is that I mean, because we in place in the SOP all this risk management, risk analysis. What do you think that is, it's not that I'm trying to speculate here, but what do you think that might happen with the flight suddenly triggers, all these 6 passenger being positively identified as carrier? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fahmi. Yeah. Okay, now the first question about the CM's SOP. Now, I have not seen the CM SOP directly, but definitely under the NICO side, they already have a specific SOP. That is from the NICO recommendation, number one. Number two, in the airline, I'm just giving an example, such as the AirAsia, right? AirAsia, they themselves already have their own internal SOP. Yeah, internal SOP. Even like our operation, our aircraft operation, we also have our own internal SOP. Now, how well does this internal SOP can track or trace this virus? For example, let's look back at the Tawau case. Isn't it better when before boarding this has already been actually detected, rather than it wasn't detected, went into flight, and then flight for 3 hours, 2.5 hours, all the way to Tower, and then now hundreds of passengers now are being tracked because of potential COVID-19 infection. Of course, during the internally, when they are inside, they wear protective this and that and all those. But the procedures of disinfection, the procedures of what do you call it, cleaning, desanitization, is already there. Now, whether this will be an effect or not, we do not know. We do not know. I think to me, the whatever recommendations recommended by the health ministry, the CM, if there is, or the internal airlines procedures on this COVID-19 SOP, should actually be strictly be complied to, and also be subject to revision. So I'm not sure whether I managed to answer your question or not, Dr. Fahmi.
Yeah, I think this is most important, because we are trying to restart the local aviation industry. I mean, we can see that there's a lot of restriction in international traveling, but we started out with this local domestic flight. Once this hit us, I think people are getting scared to even travel domestically lah. So this is I think my concern. It will actually delay the growth of the aviation industry further lah. That's why it's quite puzzled. We have all this SOP, and then suddenly you can still this passenger can penetrate lah, and it affect about 136 passengers, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear.
Yeah. I actually, this morning when I woke up also, I was a bit surprised by, wow, 6 actually went through the crack, you see. And to me, I think we have to restudy back why this happened. Like I said just now, isn't it better? This thing was detected before even they start boarding or before even they go on flight. So I think that is something that we can look into, or if there is any other form of desanitization procedures. For example, I know that some engineers, some engineers are coming up with a design where the passengers just walk through the tunnel, form of a tunnel, and then they hopefully they through certain processes and they get desanitized. So, but we have not seen that put into practice yet, lah. I've not seen that put into practice yet. Okay, thanks for the question. Let me go to the next slide. Yeah. As we move on. Now, this slide here, I want to share with some of the participants about the cost. Yeah, some of the cost that we as an engineer, we as an MRO, whether we are aircraft engineers, whether we are the design engineers, and all those, we should actually be aware some of the cost that is actually impacted or implicated when the aircraft don't fly. Now, when the aircraft don't fly, there is a lot of reasons. It is because of grounded. Now, grounded because of what? What are the possible grounding? Grounded because of technical problems on the airplane, technical defects. Grounded because of the government instruction, like what is happening now. Grounded because there is something that is unscheduled and unexpected happen. Now, these are the costs, yeah? These are the costs that actually involved in the grounding of the airplane. Now, an average cost based on the study reported, yeah? Average cost of grounding an aircraft is actually about 10,000 US dollars per day. Now, let's calculate from, let's talk about March, yeah? Let's talk about 1st of March until the end of April. Okay, let's talk about 60 days. Now, 60 days, one aircraft, we are talking about $10,000 per day. Now, 60 days times by the number of aircraft times by the amount cost, the average cost of grounding per day, and you will calculate the high cost involved. You're talking about millions, hundreds of millions. That is why a lot of these airlines are actually filing for bankruptcy, asking the government to support. Their cash flow is having problems. Passenger don't fly. They still need to continue to serve the bank loans and all this. So the cost of grounding the airplane, regardless whether because it is COVID-19, because of a technical issue, it is very, very expensive. Therefore, we as engineers, we even have to be even more careful when we actually look and work on the airplane. Now, what about if, let's say the aircraft flies, let's say an aircraft takes off from, I just give an example. It takes off from KLIA. Now, when after it take off of KLIA, let's say the destination are supposed to go to Singapore, very nearby Singapore, and something happened in between and they have the diversion. Now, the average cost of each diversion, because of technical issue or because of non-technical issue, an aircraft diversion costs about 50 to 600,000 US dollars just for that diversion only. Now, many at times after diversion, they landed emergency on the airport. It is actually meant that aircraft is grounded. So all these are actually have a lot of cost effect, a lot of very, very high cost effect. So the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because we have to look at the figures so that we know that after all the aircraft is grounded, we really have to take care, give a very, very detailed care on the airplane, because if we are not careful, any of these issue might happen. Grounding, diversion. Now, the third one, the average cost of an aircraft return to gate is about 200 US dollars per minute. What is an aircraft return to gate? Now, myself or one of the participant, Siva, who's also online here, we have experienced we have experienced aircraft return to gate. That means when the aircraft has been pushed back for departure, yeah, and started up, and then it's supposed started up and then ready to depart to its destination. But because of the technical glitch, there is a technical defect. The aircraft have no choice but to return to gate for further check, further inspection, or further action. This is actually the average cost of return to gate. This is what we call return to gate, 200 US dollars per minute. Now, let's say you come back to the gate just for 10 minutes. 10 minutes, you're talking about how much? 2,000 US dollars just for 10 minutes. So it is very costly, and therefore, when the aircraft is under our care, and especially during this period, we have to be extremely careful. When the airplane are parked out there, there is actually more work to be done. More work to be done. Now, and there's a component, let's say there's a component change on the aircraft. Let's say we talk about, let's say we change electronic engine control. We call it the ECU. And ECU costs about 500,000 to 700,000 US dollars, depending on the engines. So it is very expensive. Now, this component can fail or not. It can fail, especially when the airplane is grounded, when the airplane is not being taken care well during they call it the hibernation period. If we don't do the necessary procedures, all these costs will going to come back up, add on to the existing problems that we have. Now, if you look at the slides here, these are some of the things. These are some of the things that actually happening, in the industry on the airplanes. For example, if you look at the airplanes on the top left corner, you see that birds, when the airplanes are parked on the ramp, birds come onto the airplane one. Birds like to fly, but they also like somebody to carry them and fly. They like to go to the airplane and make nest and stay inside the airplane, especially the airplane that is parked. Nobody take care, nobody come and check the airplanes. They will just go in. And one of the favorite places that we experience is that the elevator and the horizontal stabilizer. There is a small little gaps in compartments. For us on our eye, right, on the ground level, it's very hard for us to see. But for the bird, they know every place in the airplane where they can make nest one. Inside the horizontal stabilizer, they'll make nest. Inside the vertical stabilizer, where the rudder is bent, there's a hole in between the lightning hole. They will go in and make the nest there one. So all this becomes all the challenges, that we are facing. Now, the other thing that we are also facing is that if you look at the center middle picture, where there's owl inside the engine, the owl is actually nesting, standing comfortably inside the engine. So if we are not careful, and this becomes a foreign object damage, FOD, to the airplane. So you can see that even after the airplane is grounded up, people say, apalah kapal terbang, mana kapal tak terbang, mana ada kerja, macam kereta lah. Macam kereta lah, kereta tak jalan, duduk sajalah kereta. No, it's even more work for us to do. Now, the other exposure that we have, you can see ground step incident. Because we need to work on the airplane. So 150, 100, 200 park airplane on the ramps. We need to climb up on the airplane because these are not airplanes parked at the gate. These are airplanes parked out of the gate, away from the gate. So they need to push steps. They need to tow steps. Now, all this actually leads to ground incident. All this leads to ground incident. So we as engineers that we are managing the technical operation of the whole operation, we have to look into all this perspective, and we have to plan and do it very carefully. Now, even in Australia, if you look at the Qantas airplane, snakes climb into the aircraft. Not only birds like to fly, stay in the airplane. Even snakes also like to climb on the airplane. Especially when we park the aircraft You know, some of the airplanes, if we look at the news, they park on the ramp, and the next, I mean, not on the ramp, yeah, on the ramp, and also some of the airplanes are parked on the taxiway. Now, these taxiway on the side of it are all grasses, and if the grass are long and tall, snakes like to stay there, and they will come up once in a while, you know, and move around and see what is out happening outside. COVID-19, what is happening, you know. So they also might even climb onto the airplanes. So all this picture that you see inside here, the ground incident, the messages after startup and all this has a cost implication in the whole operation. Now, we as engineers, we need to look into from all these perspectives from the ground level. We are not managing director, we are not the CEO, but at the very ground level, we as engineers, these are the things that we actually need to make sure to not happen, or we need to mitigate this to as low as possible. Any challenge here? So the impact of COVID-19, there is several levels, from the CEO level, from the financial what the CFO level, from even from the board level. But we as engineers, we look at those that is very at the very ground level, that everything that we do has actually an impact on the overall the livelihood of the company. Okay, any questions on these slides? If there's any questions, I felt that these slides is a very interesting slides, you know, because we never expect snakes climb onto airplane, you know. Any questions on these slides? Okay, all right. Let me go to the next slides and see elaborate a bit more. Yeah. Now this is the challenge. Yeah. Now knowing the financial impact. Yeah. Knowing all the risks, the cost risk. Yeah. When we talk about cost risk, we are also talking about safety risk as well. Yeah. When you look at this thing, you realize that you can actually break it down to a much more much more finer details of the risk. Now, all this will cost, yeah, operational disruption, and also we are facing limited resources. We know the airplane has been grounded. Let's talk for the perspective from the grounded airplane. You know, airplane is not flying, you know, aircraft is on the ground. We as the engineering team, we need to actually take and be very careful of this airplane to make sure the financial risk of the financial vulnerability are reduced to as much as possible. Number one, we have to look and understand then the aircraft is not properly protected when it is prolonged grounding. This is very vulnerable, because you see, for outside people doesn't know. When you say aircraft protection, ada ke aircraft protection? We used to say self defense ada lah, tapi aircraft perlu protection. Oh, there is a lot of protection procedures that we actually need to take care. Now, the other one, system functionality degradation. This is also one of the risks. You know, airplane parked there, you thought, you know, nobody touch it, you know, it is covered, you know, and when the aircraft need to be serviceable, need to be released for flight, the system will be operating normal. Is it like that? No, it is not like that. Why is it not like that? Why? It is actually because Malaysia, it is just like Singapore. It is a very humid condition. Very humid one. Maknanya very humid means there is a high moisture content level in our atmospheric condition. Now, electronics items such as those components on the aircraft, they are very sensitive to humidity. there was one time our aircraft went for a flight. This is many, many years ago. You know, modern airplanes are flown with the design with the glass cockpit. Now, glass cockpit is very nice and beautiful. Very nice and beautiful. Glass cockpit, the display is so colorful, and you can see the parameters, you know, running and turning. It just feels nice. But do you know, behind these nice things, we have to be very careful so that the moisture are not allowed to actually go into the avionics equipment. Because once the moisture goes into the avionics, like what happened to our airplane, two of the CRTs, two of the display on the airplane burnt during the flight. During the flight. So when they have this kind of situation, the pilot have to go into the flying with the backup system, which is actually not very welcome lah. So what is actually point to us is that even though the airplane is parked, there nobody touch it. Nobody touch it. It seems like just like our car, you know, nobody touch it, you know. But actually, the system functionality degradation risk is very high because of the atmospheric condition, because of the atmosphere, because of the humidity. Now, this also leads to another problem, the integration of the hardware and software complexity. Now, when we, you know, aeronautical engineers, right? Many of you are aeronautical engineers, aircraft engineers like me, and like for me, I'm a mechanical, you know, even though now the airplanes are, what do you call it, are still very mechanical on the outside, yeah, on the outside. But actually, the trend has been going on for the last 20, 30 years. The software control into the aircraft are being more and more imminent. More and more imminent. In fact, yesterday, there was also a discussion that came out and said, you know, we aircraft engineers, I'm talking about aircraft maintenance engineers, are losing the skill, because of the too much of software integration. But that is the trend. That is a trend. So do not overlook, you know, this issue. Hardware and software, we need to have a very strong understanding to make sure that we are able to take care of the airplane. Take care of the airplane. Don't just look at the airplane from the mechanical. Oh, landing gear ada, a tire ada, you know, the wing still there. Aircraft can fly one when the aircraft when the what they call it, the MCO is lifted. No, 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 no. We look beyond mechanical. We look into the computers. We look into the systems. We look into the diagnostic system. We look into all the electronics systems. These are all the things that becomes very challenging to us. It actually, you know, usually the avionics are taken care by the avionics. Mechanical are taken care by the mechanical. But we as the head of engineering or the engineers, we need to look beyond that. Because why? There is actually the numbers of the avionics engineers are actually much more less than the mechanical engineers. That is why we need to be understand the implication of it. Now, the other problem that the risk that we are facing that might lead to operational disruption is that skipping the proper preservation procedures. Now, preservation procedures, it is not something that we do very often. It is not something that we do. Now, when an airplane is grounded 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, it is not just like put the airplane there and then tutup and then balik rumah, you know, tutup. No, there is preservation procedures on the engines, on the auxiliary power unit. All these are actually preservation procedures, and we have not regularly done it one. Because why? Never in the history so many airplanes parked together, ma. Most of the time, the airplane just continue to fly and fly, and then put into the queue to come in for the scheduled maintenance. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, first airplane, second airplane. So the preservation procedures are something not very familiar. So this one also is a challenge. So if the proper preservation procedures are not complied, these are the things that will happen. It will cause operational disruption. Plus, because we have not been actually doing the proper, we are not used to do the preservation procedures, we have limited procedures also, limited resources. Not enough of preservation material, not enough of preservation oil, not enough of preservation rig. All this has actually have an impact. If you want to order now, if we want to order, let's say a preservation rig or the oil rig for the preservation procedures, it will take a very long time to come. It might take a long time to come, 1 month, 2 months. So all this lead to operational disruption. The other thing is actually the accidents, yeah. The more ground movement we have, now people will ask why there's a ground movement. Of course, there will be ground movement. You need to schedule airplane to come into the hangar, you know, or to move to a proper place for the preservation for engine ground run. The more ground movement, the higher is the risk for accidents and damages. People say that the safest condition for an airplane, yeah, the safest condition for an airplane is actually when the airplane is not flying. But it doesn't serve the purpose of designing the airplane. The airplanes are designed to fly. But when it is parked on the ground, there is other dangers and other risks as well, such as towing the airplane, hitting the steps, you know, landing gear collapse. All these are actually all the risks. So as an engineer, we actually look at the whole perspective. What are the possibility and what are the risks that is being involved in this COVID-19, especially during this period of the grounded airplane. The objective is one thing for very sure. Aircraft needs to be ready and serviceable for operations. Serviceable means airworthy lah. It needs when let's say the operation call, okay, we are reactivating 3 flights to, let's say, to Australia. Now these 3 flights, these 3 aircraft that is coming in, is it ready? Is it airworthy? Is it safe? Now these are all our concern as engineers. Now how do we actually operate this? Now I would like to share a bit of my experience. Because one day some of you might become, you may be involved and become a planning engineer for an engineering company or for an MRO. There are a couple of what they call it, aerospace engineers who are actually in the planning department. You know, now once you understand that what we are talking today, then you realize that if you become a planning engineer in the future, in the aircraft engineering company, aircraft MRO company, when COVID-19 like this happen, you will know immediately what is the plan. What is the plan? This is the first thing we need to know. Now, planning, planning for maintenance operation or engineering operation during non-COVID-19, macam kacang putih lah. Betul tak? Macam kacang putih lah, because non-COVID-19, everything is moving on as it is. It's very smooth. The schedule is there. Airplane has been queued up and all those. This one, no. This one, suddenly, 50 airplanes don't fly. Suddenly, 100 airplanes don't fly. Now, on top of that, on the resources side, manpower of 100%, suddenly you have to reduce to 50%. Now, 50% of this manpower, you kena selang-seli. Now, Team A come on Monday, Team B come on Tuesday, and then Team A come back on Wednesday. You know, all this become a big chaotic. It's chaos. It's really chaos. So the effective planning and engineering department, you have to sit down with the engineering operation leaders. Just like for me, you know, I have actually engineering operation to look after. But when the COVID-19 comes in, straight away I got to look for the safety manager to come up with an emergency response plan for COVID-19. You have to do it fast. Whereas myself and the lead engineers, we sit down and look through the complete aircraft. How are we going to manage with our limited manpower, limited ground equipment, limited ground support, even workshop pun tak ada, very little people. So this is actually, to me, is one of the challenges that we face. We have abundance of airplanes, but we have very, very restricted resources. Now, when we have a very, very restricted resources, we are talking about the next challenge. With what we have on our hands, how are we going to effectively coordinate the operational team members? Are you going to split into team A, team B, team C, or are you going to split it with a team A and B, and then a backup team from somewhere else? Now, what happened? What happened if one team member kena? All this scenario, we actually have to put inside the whole engineering operation. Now, those who actually came from the MRO, especially those in the mid-management, you will understand what I'm trying to say. Because once you have go through this, then you realize that it is really a very, very strong challenge and impact, this COVID-19 to us. Because why? Our engineering resources are planned by the company when all is running according to schedule one. Now we are coming up with an unscheduled. You want to look for the team. Instead of 100 people, you only get 50 people. Now we are looking at usually one night stop, we are having about 20 aircraft. Now we are looking about 50 airplanes. My God, how are we going to handle this? So effective coordination, we go through meetings. Now, want to go through meeting also now become a challenge. Why? Because of the social distancing, and people are scattered. So it becomes a new norm for us to start using Zoom for the meeting, or Google Meet for the meeting, and everybody has to use to it. Sometimes when we talk, just like me conducting the class today, I'm so used to conducting at the physical classroom. Today, I know I can see some of you, but in fact, actually, people look at me like talking to a computer. It looks odd, really, but we have to start learning to adapt to this kind of abnormalities. And this kind of abnormalities now is going to be a norm. And with this kind of tools and equipment, how are we going to coordinate the whole operational team? It's a challenge here. This challenge is, to me, is something that is, my aircraft is only about 10 airplanes. Imagine AirAsia, 255 aircraft grounded. My God, tak tahu macam mana mau handle. But if we work as a team, right, especially as the operational team members, I think the teamwork must always be there. The safety manager needs to look after the health, policies, and we as a leader support him. We ourselves have to monitor our team members all the time. Now, once we have gathered these resources, gathered this whole team, we need to do a lot of preparation. What preparation for what? Preparation for long-term parking. We need to make sure the safety of the aircraft are taken care of. We need to make sure the security of the aircraft, and there are available standby aircraft in case the government declare we need to do evacuation mission to, let's say to Kazakhstan, or to somewhere, to bring back stranded Malaysians who are being exposed to the COVID-19. Now, all this becomes a very, very challenging to us. And preparation for long-term parking takes a lot of resources, a lot of manpowers. Yeah, and especially when the airplane, let's talk about 737 is not too bad. 737, A320 is not too bad. But look at the wide body airplane, A330, A380, A350, A380. You know, the airplane is so huge. A350, the airplane is so huge. Wow, might take to do a proper protection and preservation might take days. Might take days, especially now with such a low manpower. It is actually very challenging. Now, during the long term, let's say we have prepared the aircraft, airplane has been positioned, airplane has been covered, airplane has been secured. You know, now what are we going to do after that? The procedures and the checks during the long term parking. One of the very important feature is actually monitoring. Monitoring means monitor the airplane. Monitor the airplane. Now, now, drones are still not allowed in the airport. Drones are not allowed in the airport. So physical monitoring is important. For example, if you have 50 airplanes out on the ramp, you need to do regular and consistent checks on the airplane. Why is this important? This is what I said. When the airplane is not properly protected, sometimes the covers, the protective covers, let's say the inlet, the engine inlet covers, the APU exhaust covers, the static port covers, sometimes they drop off or they blown off by the wind. You know, when these are blown off, rain, insects, all these can actually go into the aircraft, you know, through the openings and then stay inside there. So monitoring of the aircraft condition is very important. And also sometimes when the under normal operation you don't see the leakage, but when the airplane stop flying after some time, you will see some leakage. Now all this leakage that you observe must be investigated whether this is normal or abnormal. So it is not just like, okay, park, secured, cover, and then hands off, and then that's it, let's go back, you know. No, consistent monitoring is very important. Now the other thing is that some airplanes, like for example like our aircraft that we parked for don't fly for a long time, uh, we actually have a procedure that we do the engine ground run every week. Why do we do the engine ground run every week? The reason is actually because to keep the engine in the running condition, to purge the moisture, the humidity out of the engines and the aircraft systems, to keep the airplane, the avionics system up and running. You know, if we consistently do this, then the system is actually more ready for operations. And we have to do it. We cannot just park the airplane, let it quiet there in one corner for 2 months, and then later we expect when there's a flight request, we expect the flight to come up. We expect the aircraft to come out, and then suddenly the aircraft is serviceable. No, it's not like that. We have to do the procedures regularly to ensure the aircraft is always in the serviceable and running condition. Sometimes you'll be amazed and surprised when you go to the airplane after 1 week, things that you find, especially in Malaysia. Yeah, in Malaysia there is a mud insect. Mud insect, I don't know in Malay what do we call it. You know that the small little one that they like to make using mud. They like to make a sarang in the house one. Now they also like aircraft. They will go inside the static port. Sometimes they go inside dalam sana they buat sarang tebuan from made of mud. We experience this all the time. That is why we are very concerned when the aircraft don't fly. We are very, very careful to make sure all the protective covers are covered well. And we go down on the floor to check regularly. Okay. Now the procedures for returning the aircraft is to service. It can be quite a lengthy procedures. Okay, depending on the level. Sometimes just to de-preserve the airplane, you know, de-preserve the engines, de-preserve the APUs, find the ground power unit. All this might take longer time that actually just keep it in a general condition, do a weekly run. It is sometimes it might even be better to do it that way. But depending on the aircraft engineering operations, the main manufacturer's recommendation comply to those recommendations. Procedures for the returning to service, of course, the engineer has to certify that the aircraft is ready for flight. All these things are done to minimize the operational disruption, and also because we are facing with limited resources. Now, this is what we went through during this COVID-19. It is actually something that is not, this is not something that we used to do, you know. So I'm not sure if there's anybody who has any questions on these slides. Anybody has any question on this slide? Because these slides actually share with you the much more technical detail and the technical work that is actually happening right on the floor, or should be happening right on the floor. Yeah. Any questions?
Hi, good morning, TS Ricky.
Good morning to you.
I'm Farouk from TAM member.
TS Farouk, yes.
I would like to ask, how about, since our border is still closed, how
Yes.
about our future MRO businesses apart from LTP?
This is a very good very questions. What happened is that, thank you, TS Farouk. Okay, the MRO business has already been affected. Yeah, has already been affected. For example, components that are due by flight hours and flight cycles has actually stopped long. Yeah, components or maintenance due because of the flight hours and the flight cycles has already been stopped. Now, I just quote you one example. The aircraft engines and the APUs are actually due by the flying hours and the cycles. So the engine manufacturer is the one, or the engine MRO facility is the one that is first been affected. Okay. Now, the other thing is that because there are so many airplanes that is grounded, correct now? Now, when an aircraft is unserviceable, okay, usually when the components has failed, most of the time there is also a procedures where there is exchange of parts and all those. And exchange of parts, they will actually involve money, you know. Now, instead of going back to the OEM, now they're going to start robbing the airplane components. That means other aircraft that have serviceable components, instead of getting from the OEM, they're going to use this airplane. Remember the terminology of Christmas tree? Now, some of the airplanes are anticipated to become a robbing airplane, just to keep the cost low and then bring the bring the aircraft back to serviceable, using by robbing other aircraft components. Aircraft that is due by calendar months, yeah, due by calendar months, will continue to be due. That means on this particular part, whether you will like it or not, calendar months dues airplane are still subject for the maintenance. So I foresee that the MRO business will also be impacted as well. At least for the next 6 months to 1 year, the MRO business will be impacted as well. More towards less MRO work on the maintenance on the hangar base side. Yeah, on the base maintenance side. Yeah, I'm not sure, TS Farouk, whether I answer your question or not.
Video. Thank you. You answered already.
Thank you, TS Farouk. Any more other questions, guys, on this part? Okay. Now, basically, that is my last slide, because I think the peak of it is actually more on the operation part, to get an understanding of what is happening in the industry. But one thing I would like to share is that especially for the students, for the students who are aircraft future aeronautical engineers. I think if you look at the current COVID-19 situation, for students, for designers, you actually have a much more room for you to explore and do your research. For example, I just give you an example. Now, we need to come out and design a system where it's not sensitive to humidity. You can see for this time, come up with a system, design something that mitigate a component risk, exposure to environmental condition, to humidity condition. Now, also the other thing is that if you look at the airplane, the accidents that we involve, right, that is happening, a lot of it is because of the towing equipment, towing related incident. There are already examples in the industry where the towing equipment or towing truck is not required anymore, but it is still at very initial stage. So probably aeronautical engineers or mechanical engineers, you can come up with a system, design up a system where the tow truck is not required. Probably you have an electrical motor or special motor on the gear or the main gear or whatever to actually make the aircraft to be maneuver on ground electrically without using the engines. Now we have to use the tow truck because the airplane are not equipped with such facility. And even there is now, it is still very expensive, very expensive. Now, these are all the opportunities for the students, for aeronautical engineers to think about beyond what we are seeing on the airplane today. Now, especially when the airplane goes into a situation where a lot of things are unpredictable, just like this COVID-19 here. A lot of things are unpredictable. For example, I just give you another example. Corporate jets. Corporate jets are flown by high value people, high net value people. In order for them to protect the corporate jet, nobody goes near the airplane. They actually have to put on buy an equipment that costs about, I think, few 100,000. I saw it before, and you have to put that equipment somewhere underneath the airplane. It's like a box type, when you open up, with the leg extended and all those, and then you shit it on. This equipment itself, putting on the ground and make the surveillance equipment around the airplane, make sure nobody comes too near to the airplane, is hundreds of thousands. Why not install it under the airplane? Part of the airplane, just like our existing camera now. Our existing camera on the aircraft, right? Convert this into a security measure where when the airplane is parked in the long time, it is actually be connected, to a security system where anybody who approach the airplane, it triggers an alarm or triggers a signal. All these are actually can be your research, can be designed up. So if you look at what is happening on the COVID-19, the impact of the industry, the impact of the COVID-19 to the MRO industry, you see, even though it has a negative impact, it actually opened up opportunity as well. So engineers can take full advantage of it, And I'm very sure that together, because not only you and me are affected. Like I said, the chain of reaction, the domino effect. Our family is affected. Our brothers are affected. Our neighbors are affected. Our relatives are affected by this COVID-19. But I'm very sure that we can actually overcome this together. We will get this through together, opening up more opportunities. Now, that is my last slide. And with that, I'd like to hand over back the mic to Dr. Yazdi, or if there is any questions, you all can bring it up. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Yazdi.